Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking an object that presents literally the ultimate investigator's dilemma, the Shroud of Turin. And what makes this so absolutely fascinating isn't just the ancient lore around it. It's the massive, completely unresolved conflict between different types of hard physical evidence. We're looking at a true evidentiary gap here, where the physical reality of an object just straight up defies simple categorization.
Start with this staggering number, 2,000. That's 2,000 years this single, fragile piece of cloth has sharply divided science and faith. It's not just some old relic sitting quietly in a dusty vault. It's an active, ongoing battleground. Literally every time a new technological advancement comes along, it gets deployed to try and finally crack this puzzle.
Before we even look at the specific clues, really think about this for a second. Ask yourself, what actually happens when definitive science and physical forensics completely contradict each other? Usually, in any normal investigation, these disciplines align, right? They point us to a single unified truth. But here, no way. They collide head-on, forcing us to weigh one set of concrete data directly against another.
Let's move on to Section 1, the 1988 carbon dating verdict.
So back in 1988, scientific carbon dating delivered what felt like a knockout blow. The tests placed the origins of the cloth squarely in the Middle Ages. And honestly, for a vast majority of investigators, that was it. Case closed. Science had spoken, the testing was done, and the definitive label of medieval fake was firmly, and supposedly permanently, stamped on this artifact.
But then we hit Section 2. Blood tells a different story.
Because right when you think the book is shut, the physical evidence abruptly reopens the file, and man, the findings pile up incredibly fast. We're talking blood patterns telling a totally different story, traces of Jerusalem-specific pollen, and get this, an encoded 3D image. None of this aligns with that 1988 verdict of a simple medieval forgery. So let's break these down, because this escalating physical evidence, that is the absolute heart of the conflict.
Okay, the first major anomaly here is the blood. Think about it. A medieval forger painting a fake would leave specific artistic markers. Brush strokes, pigments, directional fluid flows typical of paint on a canvas. But the patterns we see here, they show a level of biological, forensic realism that a medieval painter simply wouldn't, and honestly couldn't produce. Right away, the physical forensics start chipping away at that carbon dating conclusion.
Which brings us to Section 3, Pollen Traces from Jerusalem.
So investigators actually found traces of pollen embedded deep down within the cloth's fibers. And not just any pollen, pollen that specifically ties the object to Jerusalem. Now, if this is really just a European fake from the Middle Ages, like the carbon dating tells us, why on earth does the microscopic evidence point geographically to the Middle East? This trace evidence creates this massive geographical paradox where the physical reality is directly fighting the temporal reality.
And that leads perfectly into Section 4, the 3D imaging anomaly.
Researchers made a discovery that is frankly mind-blowing. There is actually a 3D image encoded directly into the fabric itself. Just pause and think about how incredible that is for a second. We're not talking about a flat, two-dimensional painting or a basic chemical stain. It actually contains three-dimensional spatial data. This is a level of physical complexity that entirely defies our standard expectations for, any ancient or medieval artifact.
And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute paradox of the Shroud. Because this level of encoded 3D data, that's something that no medieval forger could have created. The technology, the basic understanding of 3D spatial encoding, it simply did not exist back then. So we're kind of backed into a corner, forced to ask a highly uncomfortable question. How can an object, supposedly forged in the medieval period, possess physical, data-driven properties that a person from that era was, practically speaking, incapable of creating?
Let's pull this all together in Section 5, Decoding the Evidence Gap. When we place that definitive carbon dating right next to the impossible physical forensics, the realistic blood, the Jerusalem pollen, the 3D data, the pieces simply do not fit. It's like a giant puzzle where the pieces belong to two entirely different boxes. It is a perfect, inescapable contradiction. You have two sets of data that both claim to represent objective physical reality, yet they completely cancel each other out. The conflict here isn't just some matter of opinion. It is a hardcore matter of data.
This right here is what we call the gap. It's that unresolved space where established science and forensic reality just stare each other down. Science says one thing, the evidence says another. It's an investigator's ultimate puzzle, and it challenges our very understanding of how to weigh contradictory data when both sides are presenting such compelling, objective proof.
Since this explainer is part of the Evidence Gap series, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss our new forensic deep dives every single week as we continue exploring what happens when physical facts just don't neatly add up. But as we wrap up today's dive into the Shroud, I really want to leave you with this final, lingering thought to chew on. How do you solve a case when the physical object itself is seemingly telling two completely different, mutually exclusive stories?